Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with yet another helpful beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and notification bell and you'll always know when we're posting new great content. So today what I'm going to show you how to do is a really fun, simple, circular right angle weave earring. It's pretty simple. It's a design that's been around for a bit, but if you haven't seen it, it's new to you hopefully. It's just a very basic beading stitch in a circular pattern, and we're using some really fun Swarovski crystals. So what I have here are both 6mm and 4mm Swarovski crystals. I have 8 in the 6mm and I have 9 in the 4mm, and I have that extra in the 4mm because we have the one at the very top that helps to create the loop that will hang from the ear wire. And then I just have a size 11 seed bead. This is a Toho size 11. Obviously my Yuki is fine too. And I have some 6-pound fire lines strung up here. I have about 3.5 feet, and I know it's white on white, so don't worry, I will give you plenty of close-ups so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So to help with focusing, I am just going to move this stuff off to the side here. Alright, so I'm going to start by picking up 8 of these seed beads, and I'm going to get them into a circle. Okay, that's 8. Just like that. Bring them to within a few inches of the end of your thread. Leave a tail that's long enough for you to weave it in later. Obviously, you'll hopefully have a better idea of how much you really need to weave in. Some people don't need as much as others, but as long as you can throw a needle on there and weave it in, tie a couple overhand knots, you're good to go. Alright, so I'm going to tie this into a square knot. You can see I made my 2 knots there. Right over left, then left over right. I like to form both of my knots and then pull them down together. And we have our little beaded loop here. Nice and simple. I know it doesn't look like a perfect little circle. It looks a little wonky, but that's okay. It's just because we're using seed beads that are a bit more cylindrical, and such a small amount of them, it's harder for them to sit in a perfect circle, but that's okay. That won't really matter in the project. And now I just traveled through the next few beads in my ring just to pull my knot into the beadwork a little bit. I always like to start my beading by coming out of a bead versus coming off a knot that's in between 2 beads. Okay, so we're going to get our visual analogy hats on today. So right angle weave tends to be one of the trickier stitches for people. Those who love right angle weave may not understand that statement, because oftentimes with the way some people think, it simply clicks very immediately. And then with other people, it's just sort of the stitch that tends to trip people up a lot because there's a lot of looping and swooping around here. But I tend to use visual analogies when I teach people how to do it. So I'm going to load on some beads first and then explain a little bit more about what I'm talking about. So I'm going to load on a size 11 seed bead here and one of my 6mm crystals, and that is what's going to be considered the wall of my house. Alright, and trust me, stick with me here, this will make sense in a minute. That's my wall. Now I have to load on the ceiling, and the ceiling is going to be a size 11 seed bead, a 4mm crystal, and then a size 11 seed bead. And then if you can imagine, see how it's sort of going across the top? That's our ceiling, and now we need to add on another wall. So it's going to be the same beads that we first started with, but because we're now coming down from the direction of the ceiling, we have to load the crystal first and then the seed bead underneath it. So 6mm crystal and then seed bead. Now, if you look at the seed bead in the ring that I'm coming out of, we're going to loop back around through it, heading in the same direction. So my needle is going to pop out of the same side of that bead that my thread is currently popping out. Just like that. And if you pull this all the way down, you're going to see how we get our first little unit here.
Yeah,
All right, so again, we have our 2 walls and we have a ceiling. And right now we're coming out of that seed bead in our ring. Now we're going to create another unit here, but the thing to remember with right angle weave is that we create units, but they're all attached together, so they each share a component. So in this case, they're going to share their walls. So the next unit that we pick up is only going to need 1 wall and a ceiling, because remember, the other wall that it needs is already here. So we're going to go up the seed bead and the crystal of our current wall, just like that. Now we have to pick up our new ceiling. The ceilings aren't connected, so the ceilings will all be completely separate. So it's going to be seed bead, crystal, seed bead. And I'm going to bring this down just so you can sort of see it becoming laid out, but I typically would pick up all the beads at once. So you can see how this is going to be our new ceiling. And then now we're missing the new wall. And the new wall we have to load on in the order of crystal and then seed bead, because we're heading down from the ceiling. Okay. Get those beads down there. Just like that. You can see it starting to form. So now we're going to have to loop back around into the next seed bead in our ring. So we have the seed bead that our first little unit is coming up off of. And now we're going to go into the next seed bead down. And again, I'll give you a nice good close-up of this. Just like that. So it's just the next seed bead in that ring. Pull this all the way through. And that's what we have here. Now, to add our next unit, we need to make our way to the outer wall again. So the outer wall is right over here. But right now, we're sort of in the middle. So to get to this outer area, this is where right angle weave tends to trip people up. We have to loop back up. Let me give you a better view. We have to loop back up like this, across the ceiling, down the new wall, and then we'll be able to add in the new wall. So let me head right on up. We're going to go through the wall that's right in the middle, and so again, the wall is always going to be the seed bead and the 6mm crystal. So go through that middle wall, go across that ceiling. I'm just trying to hold it in a way that you can also see it. If it starts to loosen up a little bit, don't worry. Once we pull through, we can tighten it up again. And then now we have to head down the newest wall, because remember, we always add new walls when we're coming off of walls. And right now I'm not coming off a wall, I'm technically coming out of the ceiling here. So I have to go down the wall, which again is crystal and seed bead. And then the very last step is to go through the next seed bead in our ring. And this is where we can give it one nice tug to sort of really tighten it up nicely. So this is what we'll be doing. The steps you just saw where I had to loop back around and up and down, that's what we'll do every other unit that we create, because half the time we're going to be coming out from the top and half the time we'll be coming out from the bottom. Okay, so now we are ready to add on a new wall. And so you'll notice that I'm coming out of a bead in our beaded ring. I'm not coming out of a bead in our unit here. So I'm going to pick up the new wall, which is seed bead crystal, because remember we're heading up and out, so the seed bead's going to come first. And I'm going to pick up my new wall, my new ceiling, which is seed bead, 4mm crystal, seed bead. And we're going to go down the previous wall to lock it in. Remember, going down a wall means we're going down through a crystal and a seed bead. And you'll see how this is just going to lock that new unit right in place. Now I have to go through the seed bead in my ring that I'm coming out of. That. And now I have to go up the wall right there, because remember, every other unit is going to be one way and every other unit is going to be the other way, heading in the other direction. So now I am set up to add my new ceiling. So go seed bead, crystal, seed bead, and then also the new wall. So that's the 6mm crystal and then the seed bead. And I'm looping into the next seed bead in my ring. So each of the ring, there's 8 beads, remember, in this beaded ring. So each of those beads is going to have sort of a little, the V of a unit coming off it, because our walls aren't completely, you know, perfectly parallel. They sort of V a little bit. So every single seed bead in our ring will have a V that's coming off of it with wall, wall, and ceiling at the top. So I'll loosen this up just so you can see me pull that down again. Just like that. And now again, we want to add another unit, but we're sort of in the middle of our beadwork, so we have to make it to the outer edge again. So this is what we did. What we're doing here to set up our next one is exactly what we had to do after we'd added this one right there 2 units ago. I promise you, once you're doing it, it's going to start to click. So now we have to go across our ceiling. And again, don't worry if it starts to loosen up a little bit. Once we're through all the beads we need to go through, you can give it one good tug and tighten it up again. And we never add walls when we're coming out of the ceiling. The ceilings stay separate, so that means we have to keep going. Go down your wall there, and then through the next seed bead in our ring. And you know, if you're still having some trouble with this project and you really want to make it, and you want more of a pattern, comment below. Let me know, and I can always throw together a little quickie blog that sort of has some snapshots laid out, so it's something that you can print. I know we've had a lot of feedback from people saying that they find that very helpful. All right, so now I'm ready for my new wall. So seed bead, 6mm crystal. Got to pick up my new ceiling, which is seed bead, 4mm crystal seed bead. And I'm looping back down through the wall that's already at the end to lock it into place. Just like that. And I'm going through the seed bead in my ring, just the same one that I was already dealing with, and then up the new wall that I just created. And don't be discouraged if you have trouble with this one. Right angle weave is a very tricky stitch for many people. So don't get discouraged. Just let me know, and I can, if people want to see it, I can always lay this out into a blog so you have something that you can print. So seed bead, crystal seed bead from my new ceiling right there. And then I need the wall. That's going to be the 6mm and then the seed bead below it. I'm going to loop back around into the next seed bead in my ring, and I'll give you a nice close-up once I get my needle in there. Like that. This will lock it into place. All right, so we're going to get ready to add in our last crystal, so we're going to be picking up seed bead, 6mm crystal, and then our new ceiling, so crystal, 4mm, and then seed bead, 4mm crystal, and then seed bead. Go down the wall that's already there, and of course the seed bead below it, because the wall is always the crystal and the seed bead. Okay. And then we're going to go through the bead in our beaded ring that we were already dealing with. Go up our new wall. And now, for this last unit, both our walls are there. If you can see, the only thing we're missing is the little ceiling that's going to attach them. So that's all we have to pick up, are our ceiling beads. So that's seed bead, 4mm crystal, seed bead. And we're going to go down the opposite wall to lock it into place. Just like that. Now at this point, and you can see how our circle in the center, it did straighten out a bit. It's not quite as wonky as it was in the beginning. All right, so we have to make our way again to that outer edge here. So I'm just following the thread path that's already there, not creating any new thread paths. That's sort of one of the key points of right angle weave, is that if you have to travel through your right angle weave to get to another part of it, don't create any new thread paths. Follow the ones that are already there, because they were there for a reason, because you moved literally within right angle directions to create the piece. So oftentimes people have this little cheat where they tend to go straight through beads rather than make all the turns, but take the time to make the turns. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start to add in some beads along our outer edge. So I'm going to go through the ceiling, whichever direction feels more comfortable. It doesn't really matter if you like to work clockwise or counterclockwise. Right at this step, it doesn't really matter. But I'm coming out of my ceiling there, and I'm going to be nesting a size 11 seed bead right at the top of each wall. So right where I am, I'm going to pick up a size 11 seed bead. And I'm just going to go right into the next ceiling. And remember, a ceiling is seed bead, crystal, seed bead. And I'll show you how that just sort of nests right inside. Just like that. And I'm going to do that all the way around. And it's nice. Once you get the rhythm of this project, they're really nice and quick. So they make really good gifts. I think they're a great earring for the holidays too. They just, especially in more holiday colors, I just really feel like they're such a nice sparkly fun earring, and they do, once you get the hang of them, they work up very fast. And don't we love projects that work up very fast but look like they took forever? I think they're very impressive. You can weave that tail in at any point if it starts to bug you, or you can wait till the end, which I tend to do. So again, I'm just picking up a seed bead, going through the next ceiling unit. Picking up a seed bead, going through the next ceiling unit, and then now I'm back to the beginning, and I went through that little group of seed beads, so I'm coming out of the middle one that I had just added when I started this step. Because now what we're going to do is add a little pretty right angle weave unit coming off of the middle seed bead in each of these little sections. So to do that, I'm just picking up 3 more seed beads, and I'm looping around and back into the seed bead that I'm coming out of. And you'll see we get this nice little unit that comes off. Just like that. That's a nice little accent. And now I just will travel through the next ceiling and then come out of the next middle bead, and I'm going to repeat that. So we're going to pick up 3, loop back around through the seed bead we're coming out of, and then just continue right on through, and that's going to be the most easiest thing to do. The most easy, I should say. So do that again, pick up 3. Oops. And if you have a bead or so here and there that's a little irregular, you don't want to use those beads. You can just push them to the side. That's called culling your beads. So again, I'm going to loop back through and then continue right on through the next seed bead, the crystal, and then the next 2 seed beads. So I'm popping out, setting myself up to do it all over again. You're going to do this on every little section. It does move along nice and fast. So this isn't super tight beadwork, so it's very easy to move through these beads. Unlike some other bead stitches where with multiple passes things can start to get a little bit tight, especially if you're using really small beads like 15s. This is a nice project because you're never really having to stress about forcing needles through little areas. And honestly, once you get the hang of it, you'll whip a pair of these earrings out in a half an hour. Alright, I got my last one in there. And this time I'm going to loop back around through the seed bead. I'm going to continue through the next seed bead and then just the crystal. Because now what we're going to do is add in the little part at the top that will end up being where our ear wire will be. So I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads, that last crystal, and then a group of 6 seed beads. I'm going to slide this all the way down. I'm going to go back down through the crystal and then through that same crystal in our ring, but in the opposite direction. So we're not coming back from where we started, we're looping back around. So that way our needle pops out the same spot that our thread does. And don't worry if this all looks a little loose, just pull it down carefully. Oops, I forgot to pick up my 2 little seed beads there. Let's see, just gotta back right out of that. Sorry about that. Pick up my 2 seed beads, then we loop back through, and I'll give you a good view of this. So, what we had here is picked up 2 seed beads, the crystal, 6 seed beads, went back down through the crystal, picked up 2 new seed beads, and then went through the crystal again. So my thread is coming out the same spot that the other thread was previously as well. And sometimes you just have to adjust it down a little bit to make sure it sits evenly on top of that crystal. Sometimes your loop might look a little bit wonky too. You can just use your needle just to adjust it and just pop, like for example, that little bead just needs to be popped up, just like that. And at this point, the only thing left to do is go back up through this. Let me give you a nice good shot of that. Go back up through this so that way we can reinforce it, because it's always important after all this beautiful work and the time to make sure that you reinforce those areas that are going to have a little bit more stress. So that's where an ear wire would be, or where a clasp would be. Take the time to reinforce it. So I'm just going to go back up through it again. Back down through that crystal. And just go with whatever your needle happens to be able to pop through. Sometimes people tend to take more time trying to get their needle to go through more beads at once, and it would have been faster just to have gone through a smaller amount of beads more often, if that makes sense. Go through that crystal again. And there we have it. We have our cute little adorable earring. So all that's left is just to weave out our thread, tie some overhand knots as we go. And we have our chain nose pliers here and the other set of ear wires, or the other half of the pair of ear wires. Gonna stick it right on there, nudge that little loop shut. And then what I'll do off camera is I'm just gonna weave out my tail and my working thread, and then it's all done. So that wraps it up, folks. Again, if you're struggling at all with right angle weave, it's okay. You are not abnormal for struggling with right angle weave. It is a tougher stitch. Let me know below, and I'm happy to try to do up some little quickie pattern on this in a blog that you can print out if you'd like. So I tend to do that a lot, so make sure you're checking out our blogs as well. There's a lot of little crossover projects. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will link you below to the items I used to make this earring if you want to give it a try yourself. And make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for any of the other beading and jewelry needs that you have. Bye.